The crack of skin against skin silenced the entire restaurant. Every fork stopped moving. Every conversation died. 73 guests at the Gilded Terrace, one of Beverly Hills' most exclusive establishments, turned their heads toward the commotion near the private dining section. Patricia stumbled backward, her serving tray crashing to the marble floor. Champagne glasses shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces. The sound echoed through the stunned silence like a gunshot. Her cheek burned red and hot. Her eyes watered from the impact, but she refused to let a single tear fall. She had learned a long time ago that crying in front of people like this only made things worse. William Hartley stood over her, his face twisted with disgust. His designer jacket was stained with a tiny drop of sauce, barely visible, completely insignificant, but to him it was an unforgivable offense worthy of public humiliation. "You stupid girl," he hissed loud enough for everyone in the restaurant to hear. "Do you know who I am? Do you know who my father is?" Patricia's hands shook as she reached for the fallen tray. Her voice came out steady despite the humiliation burning through her entire body. She had practiced this voice. The calm voice, the professional voice, the voice that kept her employed when everything inside her wanted to scream. "I apologize, sir. I'll have your jacket dry cleaned immediately. The restaurant will cover all costs." "Dry cleaned?" William laughed cruelly, looking around at his 4 friends for support. They gave it eagerly, snickering like hyenas around a wounded animal. "This jacket costs more than you'll make in a year. Maybe if they hired competent staff instead of diversity hires, we wouldn't have these problems." The words hit Patricia harder than the slap. Diversity hire. She had heard it before, whispered behind her back, muttered under breath when customers thought she couldn't hear, but never so publicly, never with such venom. The restaurant manager rushed over, already apologizing, already bowing, already offering free meals and compensation. His name was Gregory, and Patricia had watched him throw countless servers under the bus to protect wealthy customers. Today was no different. "Mr. Hartley, I am so deeply sorry. Please, let us make this right. Complimentary dinner for your entire party, a bottle of our finest champagne, and I assure you this employee will be dealt with appropriately." Nobody defended Patricia. Nobody said a word against the son of Richard Hartley, the real estate mogul whose development spanned from Malibu to Manhattan. The other diners had already turned back to their meals, uncomfortable witnesses choosing comfortable ignorance. Nobody noticed the 7 men in the corner booth. Nobody noticed the way one particular man slowly set down his glass of water. Nobody noticed the cold fury settling into Chan-woo's dark eyes as he watched the entire scene unfold. Chan-woo was 41 years old, and he had seen many terrible things in his life. He had done some terrible things too, but something about watching this young woman be humiliated in front of a room full of people who couldn't be bothered to help sparked something deep in his chest, something he thought he had buried a long time ago. He didn't speak, he simply watched, and he remembered everything. The restaurant manager escorted Patricia toward the kitchen, still apologizing profusely to William, still treating her like she was the problem instead of the victim. Her cheek was already starting to swell, but Gregory didn't seem to notice, or didn't seem to care. Chan-woo's second-in-command, a man named Jun-ho who had been with him for 15 years, leaned over slightly. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Should we handle this, boss?" Chan-woo's jaw tightened. His fingers tapped once against the white tablecloth. A simple gesture, but one that his men knew well. It meant he was thinking, planning, calculating. "Not yet," he said quietly, "but the night is young, and I want to know everything about the man who just struck that woman." Jun-ho nodded and pulled out his phone, already texting instructions to their intelligence team back in New York. Patricia had no idea that her entire life had just changed. She had no idea that the wrong man had witnessed the wrong thing happening. She had no idea that in a booth 15 feet away, one of the most powerful men on the East Coast had decided to take a personal interest in her future. All she knew was that her cheek hurt, her pride was shattered, and she still had 4 more hours left on her shift. Patricia pushed through the kitchen doors, and the moment they swung shut behind her, she finally let herself breathe. Her cheek still stung from the impact. Her hands still trembled with a mixture of rage and humiliation. The kitchen staff gave her sympathetic looks but said nothing. They had all been there at some point. They had all learned that speaking up meant losing their jobs. Miguel, one of the line cooks who had worked at the Gilded Terrace for 7 years, caught her eye and shook his head sadly. He mouthed the words, "I'm sorry," before turning back to his station. It was the most anyone would do. Gregory cornered her by the dishwashing station before she could even splash cold water on her face. His voice was sharp but quiet, careful not to let anyone else hear. "You're going to go back out there and personally apologize to Mr. Hartley. You're going to offer him a complimentary bottle of our most expensive champagne, and you're going to smile while you do it." Patricia stared at him in disbelief. "He slapped me, Gregory, in front of everyone. You saw it. I saw you spill something on a very important customer, and then I saw him react. That's what the security cameras will show. That's what the incident report will say. That's not what happened, and you know it." Gregory stepped closer, his voice dropping even lower. "Listen to me very carefully. William Hartley's father plays golf with the owner of this restaurant. One phone call and you're not just fired. You're blacklisted from every restaurant in Los Angeles. Is that what you want?" Patricia thought about her mother in the hospital. She thought about the bills piling up on her kitchen counter. She thought about the physical therapy program she was supposed to start next month, the one she had been saving for over 3 years. If she lost this job, she would lose everything. She swallowed her dignity like broken glass. "Fine." Gregory nodded, satisfied. "Good, take 5 minutes to compose yourself, then get back out there." He walked away without another word, already rehearsing his apology to William Hartley in his head. Patricia turned to the small mirror hanging above the dishwashing sink. Her cheek was red and swollen. By tomorrow, it would be a bruise. She would have to cover it with makeup. She would have to lie about how she got it. She had been doing this for 2 years, smiling when she wanted to scream, being polite when customers treated her like garbage, pretending she didn't notice when people clutched their purses tighter as she walked by or spoke to her slowly like she couldn't understand English. She was 27 years old, and she was so tired. But tired didn't pay bills. Tired didn't keep her mother alive. Tired didn't get her into that physical therapy program that represented every dream she had ever had. So she splashed water on her face, fixed her hair, and prepared to apologize to the man who had just assaulted her. Back in the corner booth, Chan-woo excused himself from his associates. He walked toward the restroom, but his fingers were already pulling out his phone before he reached the hallway. He dialed a number from memory. "Run a name for me," he said quietly, his Korean accent barely detectable after 20 years in America. "William Hartley, his father is Richard Hartley. Beverly Hills Real Estate. I want everything. Business dealings, debts, secrets, criminal history, all of it, and I want it tonight." He listened to the response, then ended the call without saying goodbye. Junho appeared beside him like a shadow, as he always did. The man had an uncanny ability to anticipate when Chan-woo would need him. "You're taking a personal interest in this," Junho observed. It wasn't a question. Chan-woo's expression remained neutral, but his eyes were hard. "That girl reminded me of someone." Junho had known Chan-woo for 15 years. He had been there through the rise of their organization, through the wars with rival families, through the transformation from street-level operations to legitimate business fronts worth hundreds of millions. He knew better than to ask who the girl reminded him of. Some wounds never healed, some memories never faded. "What do you want to do?" Junho asked. Chan-woo was silent for a moment, watching through the hallway window as Patricia emerged from the kitchen carrying a bottle of champagne. Her face was composed, professional, betraying nothing of the humiliation she had just endured. But Chan-woo saw the way her hands trembled slightly. He saw the redness on her cheek that no amount of composure could hide. "For now, we watch," he said. "But make sure she gets my card before she leaves tonight. I want to have a conversation with her." Junho nodded and disappeared back into the dining room. Chanwoo remained in the hallway for another moment, memories flooding back against his will. A market in Seoul, a woman in simple clothes, a politician's wife with cruel eyes and a heavy hand. His mother had never recovered from that day. The shame had eaten at her until there was nothing left. He had made a promise at her grave, a promise that he would never stand by while the powerful crushed the powerless, a promise that he would become strong enough to protect people like her. He had kept that promise in many ways, built an empire, accumulated power, made himself untouchable. But sometimes, the universe reminded him why he had started down this path in the first place. Patricia returned to the dining floor with the bottle of champagne. It cost $400, more than she made in a week after taxes. Her face was composed into a careful mask of professionalism. Her eyes revealed nothing of the storm raging inside her. She approached William's table with measured steps, aware that every person in the restaurant was watching, judging, waiting to see what she would do. "Mr. Hartley," she said, her voice steady and clear, "on behalf of the Gilded Terrace, I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience I caused this evening. Please accept this champagne as our gift to you and your guests." William leaned back in his chair, spreading his arms wide like a king receiving tribute. The smirk on his face made Patricia's stomach turn. "See, boys, they can be trained after all." His friends laughed like it was the funniest thing they had ever heard. Patricia set the champagne down carefully, her hands steady through sheer force of will. "Is there anything else I can get for you this evening, sir?" William looked her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. His eyes lingered on her body, assessing her like merchandise rather than a human being. "You know what? There is, my jacket. I expect it returned to my home by tomorrow morning, dry cleaned and pressed. If there's even a hint of that stain left, I'll have your job, and I'll make sure you never work in any restaurant in Los Angeles again. Do we understand each other?" Patricia nodded once. "Of course, sir. I'll handle it personally." She walked away without looking back, her spine straight, her head held high. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. She didn't see Chanwoo watching her from across the room. She didn't see him slide a plain white business card to a busboy along with $100 bill. She didn't hear him say, "The waitress, the one who was struck. Make sure she gets this before she leaves tonight. Tell her nothing, just give her the card." The busboy, a young man named Carlos who was saving money for college, nodded quickly and pocketed both items. The evening dragged on like a slow-motion nightmare. Patricia served 18 more tables. She smiled and nodded and fetched and carried. She pretended her cheek didn't throb every time she moved her face. She pretended she couldn't feel William Hartley's eyes on her whenever she walked past his section. At 11 o'clock, his party finally left. They didn't tip. Of course they didn't tip. By 11:30, the restaurant was empty except for staff cleaning up in one corner booth that had been occupied all evening. Patricia noticed them for the first time as she wiped down tables nearby. 7 men in expensive suits, Asian, well-groomed. Something about them made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. They weren't loud like other wealthy customers. They didn't demand attention or treat the staff like servants. They had been quiet all evening, speaking in low voices, ordering modestly, and tipping generously. The man at the center of the group was particularly striking. Handsome in a severe way, with sharp cheekbones and dark eyes that seemed to see everything. A faint scar ran along his jawline, barely visible in the dim lighting. He looked up and caught her staring. Patricia quickly looked away, embarrassed to be caught watching, but not before she saw something flicker in his expression. Recognition, sympathy, she couldn't tell. Gregory rushed over to their table with the bill, his entire demeanor different than it had been with other customers. He was nervous, almost afraid. Patricia watched from across the room as the man with the scar slid an envelope across the table, without even glancing at the bill. "There's 50,000 in cash in that envelope," he said calmly. His voice was smooth and controlled, carrying just enough for Patricia to overhear. "It covers our meal, the private service, and a generous contribution to ensure our visit here tonight stays completely private." Gregory's eyes widened. His hands trembled as he took the envelope. "Sir, that's incredibly generous. We appreciate your business so much. Please, if there's anything we can do to make your future visits more comfortable." "There is one thing." The man stood, and even from across the room, Patricia could feel the power radiating from him. "The waitress, the one your customer struck earlier. She handled herself with dignity under extremely difficult circumstances. I trust she won't face any repercussions for tonight's incident." It wasn't a question. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command wrapped in polite language. Gregory swallowed hard. "Of course, sir. Absolutely. She's one of our best employees." The man nodded once, then led his group toward the exit. They moved in perfect formation, like a military unit. After they left, Gregory's assistant rushed over with wide eyes. "Who was that?" Gregory's face was pale. "I just got off the phone with ownership while they were paying. They told me not to ask questions. That man is connected to people who could buy this entire city block. Legitimate business on paper. But the rumors..." "What rumors?" Gregory lowered his voice to barely a whisper. "They call him the Ghost of Seoul. He runs one of the most powerful Korean syndicates on the East Coast, operations everywhere, and he's apparently very protective of people he considers to be under his care." Gregory looked across the room at Patricia, who was still wiping down tables, unaware of the conversation happening about her. "Something tells me we need to be very careful about how we treat that young woman from now on." Patricia changed out of her uniform in the employee locker room at midnight. Her body ached from exhaustion. Her cheek throbbed with every heartbeat. She just wanted to go home, take a hot shower, and forget this entire day ever happened. She was gathering her things when she noticed something tucked into the pocket of her apron that hadn't been there before. A business card. Plain white, expensive cardstock. The kind of card that cost more than most people's business cards cost in bulk. On it was only a phone number and 2 words. "Call me." No name, no company, no explanation. Patricia stared at it for a long moment. Every true crime documentary she had ever watched flashed through her mind. Mysterious men, strange invitations, women who disappeared. She should throw it away. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the memory of those 7 men in the corner booth. The way they had watched everything without interfering. The way their leader had looked at her with something that might have been respect. Maybe it was the fact that Gregory had been unusually nice to her when she clocked out, telling her to take tomorrow off with full pay. First time that had ever happened. Maybe it was just the desperate hope that somewhere in this cruel world, there was someone willing to stand up for people like her. She tucked the card into her wallet and walked out into the Lowe's Angels night. "Now I need to ask you something real. If you saw someone get publicly humiliated like that, would you stay silent or would you speak up? Drop your answer in the comments right now. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, you're about to miss what Chanwoo does next. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Hit that subscribe button and that like button before we continue." Patricia's apartment in Inglewood was small, cramped, and perpetually noisy. Sirens wailed outside at all hours. Her neighbors' music thumped through the thin walls until 2 or 3 in the morning. The building's heating system hadn't worked properly in 6 months. But it was hers, and it was all she could afford. She woke up the next morning to her phone buzzing with notifications. 3 missed calls from the hospital about her mother's new treatment plan. 2 text messages from Gregory that she ignored. 1 voicemail from her landlord reminding her that rent was due in 3 days. The same problems she faced every single day. She lay in bed staring at the water-stained ceiling, thinking about the business card sitting in her wallet on the nightstand. In the harsh light of morning, the whole thing seemed even more suspicious than it had the night before. Strange men didn't leave mysterious cards for waitresses because they wanted to help. That wasn't how the world worked. There was always a catch, always a price, always something ugly hiding behind the offer of help. But then she thought about William Hartley's face, the casual cruelty in his eyes when he hit her, the way he had laughed at her pain, the way everyone in that restaurant had just watched it happen. She thought about her mother, who had worked 3 jobs for most of Patricia's childhood just to keep food on the table. Her mother, who was now lying in a hospital bed, fighting cancer with treatments that Patricia could barely afford. She thought about her grandmother, who had lost her home in 2008 during the financial crash, who had died in a nursing home 3 years later, believing she had failed her family. Patricia had been playing by the rules her entire life, working hard, staying quiet, not making waves, and what had it gotten her? A job where she was slapped by customers and forced to apologize for the privilege, an apartment she could barely afford, a mountain of debt that grew higher every single month. Maybe it was time to stop playing by the rules. She picked up the card and dialed the number. The voice that answered was smooth and professional, female, definitely not the man from the restaurant. "Miss Patricia, we've been expecting your call." Patricia's grip tightened on the phone. "How do you know my name?" "Mr. Kang would like to meet with you this evening. A car will pick you up at 6. The location will be a public restaurant in Pasadena. You're free to leave at any time if you feel uncomfortable." "Who is Mr. Kang? What does he want with me?" "He simply wants to have a conversation. Nothing more. You have my word that no harm will come to you." Patricia laughed, but there was no humor in it. The word of a stranger who somehow knows my name and my phone number. That's very reassuring. The woman on the other end was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Miss Patricia, I understand your hesitation. In your position, I would feel the same way. But I can tell you that Mr. Kang is a man who values honor above all else. He witnessed what happened to you last night, and it disturbed him greatly. He wants to help, that's all." Patricia thought about it. A public restaurant. Daytime. She could tell someone where she was going. She could leave if anything seemed wrong. 6 o'clock, she finally said. "I'll be ready." The restaurant in Pasadena was nothing like the Gilded Terrace. It was quieter, more intimate, Korean-American fusion cuisine. The kind of place where people came for the food, not to be seen. No celebrities, no paparazzi, just good food and peaceful atmosphere. Chan-woo was already seated at a table near the back when Patricia arrived. He stood when she approached, a gesture of respect that caught her off guard. "Miss Patricia, thank you for coming. Please sit." She sat cautiously, keeping her purse on her lap, keeping her eyes on the exits. Old habits from growing up in a neighborhood where you always needed to know your escape routes. "I have questions," she said without preamble. "A lot of questions." "I would expect nothing less. Ask whatever you want." "Who are you?" "My name is Chan-woo Kang. I'm a businessman." "What kind of business?" Chan-woo smiled slightly. It didn't quite reach his eyes, but it wasn't unfriendly either. "The kind that allows me to help people who have been wronged, if they're willing to accept my help." Patricia leaned back in her chair, studying him. He was handsome up close, late 30s or early 40s, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. The scar on his jaw was more visible in the daylight, adding a dangerous edge to his otherwise refined appearance. "I didn't ask for your help," she said carefully. "No, but you deserve it." He slid a folder across the table. Patricia opened it, and her blood ran cold. Inside were documents, medical bills, student loans, her mother's treatment costs, her apartment lease, her credit card statements, everything about her financial life laid out in precise detail. "How did you get this?" Her voice was sharp with fear and anger. "That's not the important question. The important question is, would you like all of this to disappear?" Patricia stared at him. "Why? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Nobody does something like this without wanting something in return." Chan-woo was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, more personal. "When I was 17 years old, I watched a man humiliate my mother in a market in Seoul. She was a seamstress, a good woman who had never harmed anyone. She accidentally brushed against a politician's wife while reaching for vegetables. The woman slapped her across the face, called her worthless, made her kneel and apologize in front of everyone in the market. His jaw tightened at the memory. My mother cried for 3 days after that. She never truly recovered from the shame. She died 4 years later, still believing she was nothing, still believing she deserved what happened to her. He looked at Patricia with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. I made a promise to myself at her grave. I swore that I would never stand by and watch that happen to someone else. And I promised that I would never let powerful people treat ordinary people like they were disposable. When I saw that man strike you last night, when I saw everyone in that restaurant just watch and do nothing, I saw my mother again. I couldn't do nothing. Patricia didn't know what to say. The sincerity in his voice was undeniable, but she had been fooled before by people who seemed sincere. What do you want from me in return? She asked finally. Chan-woo's answer surprised her. I want you to help me destroy William Hartley, not just him, his entire family's legacy. They're not just rich, Patricia, they're criminals. They built their empire on the suffering of people like you and me, and I'm going to expose everything they've done. He leaned forward. The only question is, are you in? Over the next 2 hours, Chan-woo explained everything. His team had been investigating the Hartley family for months before Patricia ever entered the picture. What they had discovered was a pattern of fraud, exploitation, and corruption that spanned decades. Richard Hartley, William's father, had built his real estate empire on predatory lending schemes that targeted low-income families. During the 2008 financial crisis, his companies had specifically focused on Black and Latino neighborhoods in Compton, Inglewood, and South Central Los Angeles. The scheme was simple and devastating. Offer people mortgages they couldn't afford, wait for them to default, buy their homes for pennies on the dollar, sell them later for enormous profits. Thousands of families had lost everything. Generational wealth wiped out overnight, communities destroyed, lives ruined. Patricia listened with growing horror as Junho, who had joined them midway through the meeting, pulled up document after document on a tablet. We estimate that the Hartley organization displaced over 4,000 families during the crisis, Junho explained. Most of them never recovered financially. Many ended up homeless. Some died in poverty. Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. My grandmother lost her house in 2008. Junho's expression remained neutral, but his fingers moved quickly across the tablet. What was the address? 2847 West Imperial Highway, in Inglewood. A moment of silence, then Junho turned the tablet to face her. Richard Hartley's holding company purchased that property for $12,000 3 weeks after the previous owner was evicted. They sold it 4 years later for $417,000. Patricia felt like she had been punched in the stomach. That money could have saved her grandmother, could have kept her out of that terrible nursing home, could have let her die with dignity instead of shame. She died broke, Patricia said, her voice cracking for the first time. She thought she was a failure. She apologized to me before she died for not leaving me anything. Chan-woo's hand moved toward hers across the table, then stopped. He understood boundaries. This is what the Hartley family does, he said quietly. They take from people who have nothing. They destroy lives without consequences. But that changes now. That changes with us. The plan was complicated but elegant. Phase 1. Gather irrefutable evidence of the Hartley family's ongoing criminal activities. The 2008 schemes were mostly protected by statutes of limitations, but the family had never stopped their predatory practices. They had simply gotten better at hiding them. Phase 2. Richard Hartley's charitable foundation was hosting a massive charity auction at his estate in Scottsdale, Arizona in 2 weeks. They needed catering staff. Patricia would go undercover as a server. Phase 3. During the event, Patricia would access Richard Hartley's private study and retrieve documents from a safe that contained proof of ongoing fraud and corruption. documents that would bring down the entire Hartley empire. Phase 4. Deliver everything to federal prosecutors and investigative journalists simultaneously. Make the story too big to bury. Patricia shook her head. Why me? You have resources, you have people. Why do you need a waitress from Inglewood? Chan Wu was honest with her. Because if my people are caught inside that mansion, it becomes an international incident. I have enemies who would love an excuse to move against me. But if you're caught, you're a server who got lost looking for the bathroom. Nobody questions the help. He paused. And because I think you deserve to be the one who takes them down. They hurt your family. They hurt your community. You should be there when they fall. Patricia thought about her grandmother, about her mother fighting cancer, about William Hartley's hand connecting with her face. I'm in, she said. The next 2 weeks were the most intense of Patricia's life. Chan Wu's team trained her in everything she would need to know. How to navigate high-security environments without attracting attention. How to read body language and avoid suspicion. How to pick locks and crack basic safes. How to remain calm under pressure. Junho handled most of the practical training. He was stern and demanding, but fair. He never made her feel stupid when she made mistakes, just helped her correct them. You've been surviving your whole life, he told her one evening after a particularly grueling session. Navigating hostile environments, reading dangerous people, knowing when to fight and when to submit. Everything we're teaching you, you already know instinctively. We're just helping you focus it. But it was the time with Chan Wu that affected Patricia most deeply. They took walks together in the evenings after training. Santa Monica at sunset, the pier at night. Quiet conversations about their lives, their dreams, their wounds. Chan Wu told her about growing up in the poorest neighborhood in Seoul. About his father who drank too much and hit too hard. About his mother who worked 18-hour days just to keep food on the table. About the day he decided that poverty and powerlessness would never define him again. He didn't tell her everything about his organization, but he was honest about the broad strokes. He had done things in his past that he wasn't proud of, built power through methods that weren't always legal, made enemies who would kill him if they got the chance. But he was trying to change, trying to transition his operations into legitimate business, trying to use his power for something good instead of just accumulating more power. Patricia told him about her father, who had left when she was 6 years old and never looked back. About her mother, who had raised her alone while working 3 jobs. About her dreams of becoming a physical therapist so she could help people heal from their injuries the way no one had helped her heal from her wounds. Something shifted between them during those walks. Not romance exactly, not yet, but connection, understanding. 2 damaged people recognizing the same damage in each other. You could have been anything, Chan Wu said one night as they watched the waves crash against the Santa Monica shore. With your intelligence, your determination, you could have been a doctor, a lawyer, anything. Patricia laughed softly. Yeah, well, intelligence doesn't pay for college, and scholarships don't pay the rent while you're studying. That's going to change, Chan Wu said quietly. I promise you that. Patricia didn't know how to respond to that, so she just stood beside him in comfortable silence, watching the waves. The night before they were scheduled to leave for Scottsdale, Junho pulled Chan Wu aside with alarming news. We have a problem, Junho said, his face grave. William Hartley is engaged. Chan Wu frowned. We knew that, some socialite from Manhattan. No, Junho pulled up a photograph on his phone. Look at the engagement announcement that just went public. Chan Wu took the phone and looked at the image. His face went pale. The woman in the photo was beautiful, elegant, Korean, smiling at the camera with empty eyes. That's Yuna, Chan Wu breathed. My cousin. She disappeared 3 years ago. We thought she was dead. Junho nodded grimly. It appears she's very much alive, and she's scheduled to marry William Hartley in 3 weeks. Chan Wu's hands trembled slightly as he stared at the photo. Yuna had been like a sister to him, the daughter of his mother's sister. When she vanished, he had spent millions trying to find her, hired investigators, offered rewards, searched every corner of the criminal underworld. Nothing. And now here she was, arm in arm with the same monster who had slapped Patricia in that restaurant. "The mission just changed," Chan-woo said quietly. "We're not just gathering evidence anymore, we're getting my cousin out of there." The Hartley Foundation's annual charity auction took place at Richard Hartley's private estate in Scottsdale, Arizona, one of the wealthiest zip codes in the state. Private jets lined up at the nearby airstrip. Guests arrived in Rolls-Royces and Bentleys. Patricia moved through the crowd in her catering uniform, serving champagne and hors d'oeuvres, being invisible. It was a skill she had perfected over years of service work. The wealthy didn't really see the people who served them. They looked right through you like you weren't even human. Tonight, she used that invisibility like a weapon. Chan-woo was also present, but as a guest. His cover story identified him as a Korean tech investor interested in Arizona real estate developments. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit and spoke flawless English with just a hint of an accent. His smile was charming and disarming. Nobody suspected a thing. William Hartley was there too, of course. He held court near the main bar, bragging loudly to anyone who would listen about his upcoming wedding to the most beautiful woman in the world. He didn't seem to recognize Patricia in her server's uniform. To him, all service workers looked the same. But Patricia recognized him, and every time she walked past him, she imagined what it would feel like to watch him dragged away in handcuffs. She also got her first look at Yuna. The woman was stunning, tall and graceful, with the kind of beauty that seemed almost unreal. She moved through the party with practiced elegance, smiling and nodding at guests, touching William's arm with what appeared to be genuine affection. But Patricia had spent years reading people's true emotions behind their fake smiles. It was a survival skill in her line of work. Yuna's eyes were dead. Her smiles were mechanical. Her laughter was hollow. This wasn't a woman in love. This was a woman in chains. At exactly 9:47 p.m., during the live auction when everyone's attention was focused on the stage, Patricia slipped away from the catering area. She followed the route Junho had mapped out during his reconnaissance. Service corridor, back staircase, third door on the left. Richard Hartley's private study. The door was locked with an electronic keypad, but Chan-woo's tech expert had given her a device that bypassed such systems in under 30 seconds. She pressed it against the keypad, waited for the click, and slipped inside. The study was a monument to old money arrogance. Leather-bound books that nobody had ever read lined the walls. Hunting trophies from exotic locations decorated the shelves. A massive mahogany desk dominated the center of the room, covered in papers and files. Patricia found what she was looking for behind a painting on the far wall. A hidden safe, just as the intelligence had indicated. The combination was Richard Hartley's wedding anniversary to his first wife, not his current trophy wife. People were sentimental about strange things when it came to their secrets. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside were flash drives, paper documents, and photographs. Years of evidence, proof of ongoing fraud, records of payoffs to politicians, documents linking the Hartley organization to money laundering operations. Everything they needed. Patricia was loading the contents into her bag when the door opened behind her. She froze. Yuna stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with surprise. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Then Yuna stepped inside and closed the door behind her. When she spoke, her voice was low and urgent. "You're working with Chan-woo." Patricia's heart pounded in her chest. She considered lying, considered running, considered a dozen options in the space of a second. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me." Yuna moved closer, her movements quick and precise. "I recognize his methods, the infiltration, the timing, the attention to detail. My cousin has a very specific style." Patricia's mind raced. This was the worst possible scenario. If Yuna raised the alarm, the whole operation would collapse. They would never get another chance. "Are you going to stop me?" Patricia asked quietly. Yuna's expression cracked. For the first time, Patricia saw the fear and desperation beneath the polished surface. "No," Yuna said. "I'm going to help you." The story came out in whispered fragments as the two women huddled in the corner of the study, ears tuned for any sound of approaching footsteps. Yuna had been kidnapped 3 years ago by associates of the Hartley family. It was leverage in a business deal gone wrong. Her family in Korea had owed money to people connected to the Hartleys. When they couldn't pay, Yuna was taken as collateral. She had been a prisoner ever since. A prisoner in designer clothes, a captive in luxury prisons. "They told me if I ever tried to escape, they would kill my mother," Yuna whispered, her eyes glistening with tears. "They have her in a facility in San Francisco. Chanwoo doesn't know she's still alive. Everyone thinks she died in an accident." Patricia felt sick. "Your aunt is alive." "Yes, and as long as she's their prisoner, I have to do whatever they say. Smile for the cameras. Play the perfect fiancé. Pretend I'm in love with that monster." "We can help you," Patricia said. "Chanwoo is here. He's been looking for you for 3 years. We can get you out." Yuna shook her head frantically. "Not without my mother. They'll kill her the moment they realize I'm gone." "Then we'll get her too. But first, we need to get out of here with this evidence." Yuna hesitated, then nodded. "There's something else you need to know, something even Chanwoo's people haven't discovered." "What?" "William isn't just cruel. He's dangerous. He's killed before, and he's planning something terrible for the wedding. The guests who are coming, they're not all social contacts. Some of them are weapons dealers from Eastern Europe. The wedding is a cover for a massive arms transaction." Patricia's blood ran cold. "How do you know this?" "Because William brags about it. He thinks I'm too weak and too scared to ever betray him." Yuna's eyes hardened with determination. "He's wrong." They almost made it to the service exit. Patricia led the way, with Yuna following close behind. The halls were empty. Most of the staff was busy with the auction. Everything was going according to plan. Then a door burst open in front of them. William Hartley stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 of his personal security guards. His face was flushed with alcohol, but his eyes were sharp with suspicion. "Well, well," he said, looking between Patricia and Yuna. "What do we have here?" Patricia's mind raced. She could feel the bag of evidence hanging heavy at her side. If William found it, everything was over. "I was just showing her to the restroom," Patricia said smoothly. "She wasn't feeling well." William ignored her completely, focusing on Yuna. "You've been distracted all evening, sneaking around, and now I find you with the help in a service corridor." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Who is she? Who sent her?" "William, you're being paranoid," Yuna said with a forced laugh. "I felt nauseous. She was kind enough to help me find a quiet place." "Liar." William grabbed Yuna's arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to leave bruises. "I've been watching you for weeks. I know something is going on, and now I'm going to find out what." His eyes shifted to Patricia, and suddenly recognition flickered across his face. "Wait, I know you." He released Yuna and stepped toward Patricia, his expression twisting with rage. "You're that waitress from Lowe's Angels, the clumsy one, the one I put in her place." Patricia stood her ground. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me." William's hand shot out and grabbed her arm. "What are you doing here? Who are you working for?" Patricia's training kicked in automatically. She caught his wrist, twisted, and used his own momentum to send him stumbling into the wall. The shock on his face was almost worth every terrible moment she had endured over the past weeks. The security guards moved toward her, but before they could take 2 steps, shadows seemed to materialize from the walls. 2 of Chanwoo's men appeared from nowhere. They were silent and efficient, taking down the guards in a matter of seconds without making a sound. William scrambled to his feet, his face pale with fear for the first time in his privileged life. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" he sputtered. "My father will destroy you. He'll destroy all of you." A calm voice cut through the chaos. "Your father is about to have much bigger problems." Chanwoo emerged from the shadows, calm and composed despite the chaos around him. His eyes were cold as he looked at the man who had hurt Patricia and imprisoned his cousin. He held up his phone. Right now, every major news outlet in America is receiving evidence of your family's crimes. The FBI received their copy 30 minutes ago. By the time the sun rises, your father's assets will be frozen. His associates will be scrambling to save themselves. And you, Chan-woo stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. You will spend the rest of your pathetic life paying for what you've done. William's face went from red to white in an instant. You can't do this. We have lawyers. We have connections. We'll bury you. Your connections are all busy trying not to get arrested themselves. Chan-woo smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Your lawyers are reading about your crimes on their phones right now, and by tomorrow, everyone in America will know exactly who you are and what you've done. He gestured to his men. Secure him. We're leaving. The extraction was flawless. Chan-woo's team moved through the estate like ghosts, avoiding security cameras and patrolling guards with practiced ease. Within 20 minutes, Patricia, Yuna, and the evidence were aboard a helicopter heading toward a private airstrip. Yuna clung to Chan-woo's hand the entire flight, tears streaming down her face. I thought I'd never see you again, she whispered. I never stopped looking, Chan-woo replied, his own voice rough with emotion. Never, not for a single day. Patricia watched them and felt something shift in her chest. She had spent so long believing that family was just the people who hurt you and left. But watching Chan-woo with his cousin, seeing the fierce protective love in his eyes, she realized that family could also be the people who never stopped fighting for you. What about my mother? Yuna asked urgently. They'll kill her when they find out I'm gone. Chan-woo's expression hardened with determination. We're already on it. Junho's team is moving on the San Francisco facility right now. By the time William's people realize what's happening, your mother will be safe. True to his word, Junho called 3 hours later with confirmation. Yuna's mother had been recovered from a private medical facility in San Francisco. She was weak but alive, and she was finally free. The next 48 hours were chaos. The story exploded across every news network in America. Federal agents raided Hartley properties in Los Angeles, New York, Scottsdale, and Miami. Richard Hartley was arrested at his Beverly Hills mansion while still in his bathrobe. William was apprehended trying to cross the Mexican border in a rented car with $200,000 in cash. The evidence Patricia had recovered was devastating. Not just the 2008 fraud, but ongoing schemes that were still active. Money laundering, bribery of public officials, and thanks to Yuna's information, a massive arms trafficking operation that sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. 14 people were arrested in the first wave, 37 more in the weeks that followed. The Hartley empire, built over 3 decades on the suffering of ordinary people, collapsed in a matter of days. Patricia watched the coverage from Chan-woo's New York penthouse, where she and Yuna had been moved for their safety. She watched William's mugshot appear on CNN. She watched Richard Hartley's lawyer announce that his client was cooperating with federal authorities. She watched justice happen in real time. Federal prosecutors wanted Patricia to testify at the trial. She was a key witness to William's assault and could speak to the character of the Hartley family. Her testimony would be valuable in establishing the pattern of cruelty and disregard for others that define their behavior. Patricia was terrified. She had never spoken in public before, never stood up in front of a room full of people and told her truth. Her whole life had been about staying quiet, staying invisible, staying safe. Chan-woo found her on the balcony of the penthouse the night before she was scheduled to testify. She was staring out at the Manhattan skyline, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. You don't have to do this, he said quietly, standing beside her. My lawyers can find another way. We have enough evidence without your testimony. Patricia shook her head. No, I spent my whole life staying quiet, being invisible, letting people like them win because fighting back felt too dangerous. Not anymore. Chan-woo studied her face in the dim light. You're the bravest person I've ever met. I don't feel brave. I feel angry. Good, anger is fuel. Use it. They stood in silence for a long moment, watching the lights of the city glitter below them. What happens after? Patricia asked. After the trial, after all of this is over, what happens then? Chan-woo turned to face her fully. That depends on you. The trial was held in Los Angeles, in the same city where the Hartleys had built their empire on stolen dreams. Patricia walked up the courthouse steps in a simple but elegant suit that Yuna had helped her choose. Reporters swarmed around her, shouting questions, snapping photographs. She ignored them all, keeping her eyes fixed on the doors ahead. Inside the courtroom, William Hartley sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit. His designer clothes were gone. His arrogant expression was replaced by something that looked almost like fear. When he saw Patricia walk in, his face twisted with hatred. You, he spat, loud enough for the whole courtroom to hear. You did this. You ruined everything. You're nothing. You're nobody. The judge banged his gavel for order, but Patricia had already stopped walking. She turned to face William directly. Her voice was calm and clear when she spoke. I'm the waitress you slapped in that restaurant. I'm the granddaughter of the woman your father stole from. I'm the voice of every family your empire destroyed. And I'm the reason you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. She smiled. Have a nice day, sir. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as Patricia was sworn in and took her seat in the witness stand. She spoke clearly and directly for the next 2 hours, without embellishment or exaggeration. She told her story, her grandmother's story, the story of thousands of families who had been crushed by Hartley greed. By the time she was finished, several members of the jury were openly crying. The lead prosecutor looked like he had just been handed the easiest conviction of his career. William Hartley stared at the table in front of him, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. The verdict came down 3 weeks later. Guilty on all counts. Richard Hartley, 30 years in federal prison. William Hartley, 18 years in federal prison, plus additional charges for assault and attempted witness intimidation. 12 other associates, various sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. The Hartley fortune was seized in its entirety. Properties were liquidated. Restitution was ordered for thousands of victims, including Patricia's family. She received a letter from the Department of Justice 2 months after the trial. Her grandmother's estate was entitled to $437,000 in restitution payments, adjusted for inflation and interest. Patricia sat on her bed in her tiny Inglewood apartment and cried for an hour. Happy tears, grieving tears, complicated tears that she didn't fully understand. Her grandmother had died believing she was a failure. But now, finally, someone had acknowledged that what happened to her was wrong, that she deserved justice, that her suffering mattered. It wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough to bring her grandmother back or undo the years of shame and poverty. But it was something. It was a beginning. 6 months after the trial, Patricia started her physical therapy program at UCLA. The scholarship covering her tuition had appeared mysteriously in her financial aid package. When she asked the administration about it, they would only tell her that it was funded by an anonymous donor through a private foundation. She knew exactly who was responsible. She confronted Chan-woo at a coffee shop in Santa Monica. It had become their spot over the past few months, neutral territory where they could meet without the complications of his world or hers. You didn't have to do that, she said, sliding into the seat across from him. I don't know what you're talking about. The scholarship, the apartment in Westwood, my mother's medical bills being mysteriously paid in full by an anonymous benefactor. Chan-woo sipped his coffee, his expression innocent. That does sound mysterious. Patricia laughed despite herself. You're a terrible liar. I'm actually an excellent liar. I just choose not to lie to you. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Something had shifted between them over the past months. The connection that had begun during those evening walks in Santa Monica had deepened into something stronger. Something that felt like it might be love, though neither of them had said the word out loud. What happens now? Patricia asked. Chan-woo set down his coffee and looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. I'm relocating my base of operations to Los Angeles. My organization is shifting. Less shadow work, more legitimate investments. I'm building something new. He paused. I'm opening a foundation, housing assistance for families affected by predatory lending, job training programs, legal aid for people who can't afford representation. Everything the Hartleys took from this community, I want to give back. Patricia's eyes widened. That's not what I expected from a man in your position. My mother used to say that power is only meaningful if you use it to lift others up. I forgot that for a long time while I was building my empire. You reminded me of who I was supposed to be. He reached across the table, and this time his hand didn't stop short of hers. His fingers intertwined with hers, warm and strong. I want you to run it, the foundation. When you finish your degree, or now if you prefer, it's yours to shape however you want. Patricia was overwhelmed. This was everything she had ever dreamed of. The chance to help people like her grandmother, like her mother, like herself. To take all the pain and injustice she had experienced and transform it into something that could heal others. But accepting meant tying her life to Chan-woo's, to his world, to whatever complications and dangers still lurked in the shadows of his past. I need to think about it, she said. Chan-woo nodded, not releasing her hand. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. 1 year later, the Kang Morrison Community Foundation opened its doors in Inglewood. The building was just 3 blocks from the street where Patricia had grown up. It was beautiful, modern and welcoming, designed to feel like home rather than an institution. Inside were offices for legal aid attorneys, classrooms for job training, a child care center for working parents, and a physical therapy clinic where Patricia worked 3 days a week while finishing her degree. The name Morrison was Patricia's grandmother's maiden name. Chan-woo had insisted. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew a crowd of community members, local politicians, and media. Patricia stood at the podium, looking out at the faces of people who reminded her of her family, her neighbors, herself. This foundation exists because someone believed that ordinary people deserve justice, she said, her voice strong and clear. It exists because one moment of cruelty led to something greater than anyone could have imagined. And it exists because we refuse to let the powerful steal our futures without consequence. The crowd cheered. In the back, trying to be inconspicuous, Chan-woo watched with pride shining in his eyes. His men surrounded him like shadows, but for once they seemed almost relaxed, almost happy. Yuna stood beside her mother, both of them crying happy tears. Yuna had found her purpose, too, working as a translator and victim advocate for Korean families navigating the American legal system. Her mother was regaining her strength every day, finally free from the cage the Hartleys had kept her in. And Patricia's mother was there in the front row, cancer-free after successful treatment, watching her daughter change the world. That evening, Chan-woo hosted a private celebration at his new estate in Pacific Palisades. Only close friends and family attended. The kind of gathering that would have been impossible a year ago, when his life was all shadows and secrets. Patricia found him alone on the terrace, looking out at the Pacific Ocean as the sun set in brilliant oranges and reds. You're hiding from your own party, she teased, coming to stand beside him. I'm not hiding, I'm appreciating. Appreciating what? He turned to face her. The last rays of sunlight caught his features, softening the hard edges she had come to know and love. Everything I almost didn't have. Everything I almost gave up on. A year ago, I was a man with power and no purpose. An empire built on shadows. And then I walked into a restaurant in Beverly Hills and saw a young woman with more courage than anyone I'd ever met. He stepped closer, his hands finding her waist. You changed me, Patricia. You reminded me of my mother, of my promises, of the man I was supposed to become. You gave me a reason to be better. Patricia's heart was pounding. After all these months of circling each other, of carefully maintaining boundaries, of pretending they were just friends and partners, She was tired of pretending. "I'm going to run the foundation," she said. "I've thought about it and I want to do it. I want to build something that lasts, something that matters." Chan-woo smiled, and for once it reached his eyes. "I was hoping you'd say that. But I need you to understand something." Patricia placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath her palm. "I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me, for my grandmother, for everyone who was told they didn't matter. I would never expect anything else. And this thing between us," she looked up at him, vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. "I don't know what it is exactly, but I want to find out." Chan-woo cupped her face in his hands, gentle despite the strength she knew they possessed. "Then let's find out together." He kissed her softly, tenderly, with all the patience of a man who had learned to wait for things worth having. When they pulled apart, they stood together watching the last light fade from the sky, his arm around her shoulders, her head against his chest. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances. "So," Chan-woo said quietly, "what happens next?" Patricia smiled, a real smile full of peace and possibility. "Everything." 6 months after that night on the terrace, Patricia and Chan-woo returned to the Gilded Terrace restaurant in Beverly Hills. But this time, they entered through the front door. They were seated at the best table in the house. The new manager personally attended to them, obsequious and eager to please. Gregory had been fired long ago, shortly after news of his treatment of Patricia during the slap incident became public. Patricia ordered champagne, the same $400 bottle she had once been forced to carry to William Hartley as an apology for being assaulted. When it arrived, she raised her glass. "To second chances," she said. Chan-woo raised his glass to meet hers. "To justice." They drank. The restaurant was full of wealthy people enjoying expensive meals. Most of them had no idea who Patricia and Chan-woo were. They looked right through them, just as they looked through everyone who wasn't part of their world. But Patricia didn't need their recognition. She didn't need their approval. She had built something that mattered, found love that was real, created a legacy that would outlast any fortune built on greed and cruelty. And somewhere across the country, in a federal prison cafeteria, William Hartley sat alone at a metal table, eating mystery meat and remembering the day he slapped a waitress in front of the wrong man. He had 17 years and 4 months left on his sentence. Plenty of time to think about the lesson he should have learned a long time ago. Some people look weak because they choose not to fight, not because they can't. And sometimes, the person you dismiss as nobody turns out to be exactly the person who brings your whole world crashing down.